No mai haere mai, my name is Jeremy and this is the Maxim Institute podcast. Every year, as part of my job as comms manager here, I get to edit Flint Steel magazine, an annual collection of feature essays, articles, photography and illustrations that revolve around a particular theme. In December 2019, I chose the theme of recovery, repair and reconciliation. And then throughout the course of assembling the content of the magazine this year, I've often thought to myself, how on earth did I pick that one? One of the first articles I commissioned for Volume 7 was Shelly Neethling's article, Home Again. Shelley has long had an interest in child development, and she wrote her article looking at foster care in New Zealand, what can be done for kids from hard places. She discovered that in New Zealand there are approximately 6,000 children who have been removed from unsafe homes and placed in foster care. Oranga Tamariki's most recent findings reveal that 58% of children in care will not go on to obtain NCEA Level 2, and 45% of them will leave school without any NCEA qualifications at all, and 20% of them will have been involved with youth justice processes by the age of 19. Shelley poses the question, if the aim of removing children from dangerous home environments is to protect, nurture and empower them, then what are we missing? And how can the traumatic experiences of these children's lives be addressed and repaired? One of the primary interviewees for Shelley's article is Ursula Elisara. She's the CEO of Immerse, a non-profit foster care agency that trains and supports foster parents to use the Trust Based Relational Intervention model when providing a home for kids from hard places. For this month's podcast, I sat down with Ursula in her offices on the North Shore of Auckland and talked about her life, the realities of foster care in New Zealand, and what it takes to repair trauma in the lives of kids from hard places. Thanks for joining me, Ursula. It's lovely to be here in your beautiful offices, actually, with the Pahurakawa trees outside. I wondered if you could just start us off maybe by telling us a bit about the story of how you became aware of foster care and how you got into being a foster carer yourself, and then the story of Immerse more generally.
Mm-hmm. So my parents divorced when we were quite young, and my mother ran a back-to-work program for troubled teens, basically, and ended up fostering a number of teenagers in my middle childhood years. So I guess if you want to, my first taste of foster care was actually there as having foster siblings. And that experience was a positive one for us, and nothing, no harm came to any of us because of that, which sometimes can be the case. And then I was always very maternal. I just would raise baby lambs, baby possums, baby rats.
Possums, my goodness.
And had a reasonable success rate with nurturing little things. And so I guess that was a highly maternal personality, and then went on to think that I would work in an orphanage overseas when I grew up, or do something of that nature. Or definitely at the time there was lots of intercountry adoption with South America and New Zealand and like a few things, countries like that. So always had a heart for it, and was quite surprised by how easily I had 3 children. But in between our first and second child, we actually did an intercountry adoption application because it was still a big thing on my heart. And then a bit later on, before our third child was born, we took a whānau placement in our extended family for 3 little ones under 10. And so we had 5 kiddies, 5.5 kiddies in our late 20s and early 30s. And that was, so we were whānau caregivers then. And then after our third child was born, he was born with a very severe disability. So we took about 3 years off fostering when he was little, because we spent the majority of that time in Starship. And then went back into non-kin foster care when he was 3, and have been doing pretty much non-kin care ever since. So just been something that I've always been pulled very strongly towards. Yeah.
For those who are listening who might not sort of get the difference between whānau placement and non-kin fostering, fundamentally what is that difference, and kind of how does it play out in the sort of day-to-day or in terms of the overall structure of what you're doing?
Yeah, it's always the first, priority for Oranga Tamariki, or what was Child, Youth and Family at that time, to find extended family members or as close, in our case, it was close family members to step in first. It meant back then, and less so now, very little screening, which has been an issue historically for our kiddies. So because we knew the children and they knew us, and we were, close family and safe, people, for want of a better word, they came straight to us. There was no kind of screening. And then I often say that I think whānau caregiving is the hardest.
Right. Because
you have lots of grandparents raising grandchildren now as well, but aunties and uncles and extended family doing that. But you have to navigate your relationship with the adults involved, who are your family members, and prioritise
and you're
the
going to
kiddies.
have an ongoing relationship with them in the future, presumably.
Yeah, that is definitely the hope. So I often say it's one of the trickiest, because there's an added dynamic that has to be brought into that mix, and it can make the job at hand harder, because you have split loyalties, you have, you've got other issues going on that and family members can be pulled in different directions.
Right.
So it's quite a tricky space. And so I really do feel for grandparents, particularly raising grandkids, etc., and that it is really hard. So non-kin is where they're not related to you. So you've gone through usually a much more stringent assessment and preparation process, and then you will be down for hopefully a logical age and gender and things that match well with your family, and then if children fit that category, you would get called to say, hey, we've got little Johnny and this is the situation, and are you guys available for this amount of time? You never know, pretty much. A day can be 4 years, and 6 months could be finished by the weekend. It depends, because the goal is always to find whānau, and if they are found, then generally that's the goal for the for the OT now anyway.
Yeah. And so after being a foster parent yourself for quite some time, and I guess also, what was the conversation like with your husband as well? I mean, was this something he was always keen on as well, or was that something that you guys had ongoing conversations about?
I wouldn't have probably married him if that wasn't an option.
Right.
So I knew from a very young age that my life would have children not born to me in it. I don't, so that was quite strong for me. So I don't remember there being a heck of a lot of conversation, but then we met at 16 and 19. So you're quite idealistic, and, think you can manage it all at that age. So I don't think there was a whole lot of too much pre-thought or pre-work done. But the fact that he was absolutely fine to do the inter-country application between our first and second child, showed that he was absolutely open to doing that. So, yeah. And he's Samoan, so the Samoan culture is very wide village family. Your nuclear family is not the same as what we perceive in Western culture to be.
It's not such an exclusive space, almost.
Yeah, and it's very common for aunties and uncles and grandparents have a lot to do with children are very much raised in a village. And so that, I guess, is not a really big foreign concept.
Yeah.
So I think that probably made it a lot easier for him.
So from being a foster parent yourself, how did that then translate into the work that you're doing now, and kind of what process did you go through to get to where you're sitting now in the Immerse offices?
I think I've always been a natural learner, and so I was quite inquiry driven as to the behaviours that I would see with different children coming into our home, and be asking the bigger question, why, what's going on here, what's really going on here, not, this child has A, B, C and D type behaviours, but what is really going on here. And being, I think, naturally maternal and having a natural way with children, I would respond to things intuitively, and get some really incredible, and George too, get some really incredible results with children where people were like, how, particularly the authority figures had one child come to us. She was 12, had been in and out of our care since her and her siblings were 8, and my social worker at the time said, I'm not even, and it was through a chain of random events that I knew that she, was back in the care system and desperately needed somewhere to land. And my social worker said, I am absolutely not accepting this referral on your behalf until you read the 2-inch file on my desk. And I was like, yeah, file smiles, But she said, I'm bringing it over, and when you've both read it, we'll have another conversation. And so children can look terrible on paper, but when you've got a relationship with them that was built in this case, the first experience of us as a family was all summer with us, and so it was camping and non-threatening environments and fun, and so play disarms fear. And so now when I look back, I can see the language and the science and all that, but at the time it's just intuition. It's like, this is what kids need, this is what we're going to do, this. So out of that I wrote the only book that I know of in New Zealand on foster care, which was Foster Care Voices from the Front Line, taking, children that we had worked with personally that had backgrounds of various types of abuse and neglect, reflecting on our response, and then putting that into a book type format that would be easy to read for foster parents to just have a few more tools. So I wrote that book and released it in 2015. At the time that the Minister for National was Anne Tolley, for the Minister for Children, and she was in the middle of the overhaul, the final overhaul, that overhaul Child, Youth and Family, which is now Oranga Tamariki, the new Ministry for Children. So I released that book at the same conference we were speaking to, at the same conference, and I don't remember if I was right after her or a little while, but anyway, a very helpful member of my team, who's now on my team here, made sure they shoved a book into her hand as she was leaving, and was selling the books at the conference as well. And she was getting straight on a flight. Ministers don't stand around to watch other people speak. They do what they need to do and leave. And then that was 1 week. The next week I had an order for 7 more books to go to Parliament. And I found out from the Minister of Youth Justice about 6 months or a year later, when I met him in a different space at the time. He said, "Oh, I know who you are. I had to read your book before I was allowed to admit my final recommendations for what would become the new ministry."
Oh, wow.
Because I guess I was the only space where the voice of the caregiver and the intuitive strategies around what happens for kiddies were concisely in one space. The book also has the voice of a care experience person, which is Naila, who's in your magazine, and we were friends, associates even back then. And it also has the voice of social worker and the voice of one of our adult children now, who was I think 17 at the time when she wrote her chapter about what it's been like to be at that stage the sibling of 40 plus children. And so she writes from her perspective there as well. So I guess I tried to gather as many voices for that to be in one space.
Yeah. What do you think is different about what you're saying in that book to what they might have heard from sort of official sources?
I don't know, because I'm not privy to the other things that they might have been forced to read. But I think it's just a really raw but common sense, gentle reality check, I suppose, of what these kiddies go through. More than the book is not really about the plight of the foster parent, so to speak. It's more about, I wrote it with the intention of more caregivers need to see when children have sexualized behaviors, the worst thing you can do is shame them. Or if children are angry, it's because they're really sad. Anger is a more copeable emotion when you're vulnerable than to be sad. So it was more about, please don't try to fix the behavior without fixing the need. And so that was the, I guess, the the premise that I wrote it wasn't to inform government. That was just a byproduct.
Yeah. But kind of like an interpretation of what you had seen, and what the different people contributing to the book had seen over the years.
Yeah, and what it feels like to be in that space, because it's not something, especially 10 years ago, let's say, when we've been doing it for 18. There was no information. It's kind of like, oh, you've got to, you just parent the way that you have always parented. But you realise pretty quickly that you're not going to get the outcome that you're hoping for if that's the approach that you take, because our kids are defended against things that are punitive, because, enough people have dealt with them punitively for that to have really little effect.
Yeah.
So
they've already had people yell at them. They've already had people take things away from them.
They've already lost everything.
Yeah.
When you've lost everything, you've got really nothing left to lose.
In the magazine, in the article that Shelly wrote, she has a quote from you that says, "The reality is that foster children have experienced complex developmental trauma. Just loving them and putting a roof over their heads is not going to be enough to heal them." That's a pretty confronting quote, and obviously comes from a lot of experience and clinical research as well that you've done and you've seen work out. So why is that? Like, what's going on there? Because I think that a lot of people would just say love is enough, right? Like that the human heart, the soul responds. There's something deep in our humanity, and kind of, I guess, especially when there's a movie that shows adoption or foster care, or and the kids are really difficult and the parents don't understand, and then it's just, in the end, it's just love and it's understanding that kind of paves the way for a relationship to blossom. What stands in the way of that?
Yeah, it's complex, hence its name. Complex developmental trauma is. Bessel van der Kolk does a great, and I know that Shelley's quoted some of his work in the article as well, and I can't verbatim quote it, although I teach it all the time, but basically it's the experience of multiple chronic, developmentally adverse experience where the young person has had no ability to put an end to it themselves, so they are essentially powerless, and the result is often, not always, their trajectory of development, or we think about our normal trajectory of development, gets arrested at a point by trauma, and particularly if it's chronic, ongoing, at the hands of people who you should be able to know and trust, etc., etc. That has a profound effect on the developing brain for kids. And so the downstairs brain, or what we call the downstairs brain, Dan Siegel talks a lot about this upstairs brain and downstairs brain. It's a great analogy. If you take your hand and you put your thumb across the palm of your hand and you say, well, this is our downstairs brain. This is where our autonomic function, if we think of our arm as our brain stem, so our autonomic systems such as our heart rate, our temperature, our breathing, our endocrine systems, all the things we do all day, every day without thinking. Yeah. Then all that's kind of the very primitive, but that feeds into the limbic brain, the downstairs brain, which is our emotional regulation. It's our fight, flight, freeze center. It's some people call it the reptilian brain. It's really, these two brains together have two main functions. One, to keep us alive, make sure we survive, and the second one is to reproduce. So that's really its two functions. If things happen that are highly stressful, this brain codes it really well, because this brain's job is to keep us alive. When we take normal development and we say, this needs a bit of stress, like you don't grow resilience without stress. So you need a bit of stress, you need a bit of that sort of triggering of fight, flight, freeze, and then an adult calms you and you need that triggering, and an adult calms you, and that happens thousands and thousands and thousands of times.
To give you some practice.
To give you practice. And it starts with, I'm a newborn and I'm hungry, I cry, someone feeds me. It starts right back there, and it goes all the way to, I'm 15 years old and, my best friends let me down and an adult still calms me. So it's a, lifelong process. And I say it never stops. Other regulation never stops. So we have this, but over that brain lays our cortical brain. And the cortical brain is our executive functioning, our personality, our higher thinking, our processing. And so we think about our kids who have come from really hard places. This downstairs area has coded well trauma and coded well how to keep me safe. And some of those strategies are maladaptive, right? They would look maladaptive to us, but they've worked.
Yeah.
So
they've worked for the function that they needed to work for, which was a sort of that, like a really base function of like, I was safe, or I got to a safe place, or I managed to minimize the adult behavior that was scary to me.
That's right.
Yeah.
By doing this, what we would sometimes see bizarre, extreme, whatever thing, but it worked.
Even like I was able to get food in the middle of the night and hide it so that I didn't go hungry the next day or something like that.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Or I found by kicking and screaming and hurting somebody, that diverted from some other major thing that might have gone down. So these are these things that look like bad behaviour or look like strange behaviour, but they're actually adaptive ways to keep you alive. When this fight, flight, freeze centre of our brain, and we all will have a default. Some of us know in a really stressful situation we just freeze. Like it has to be something that takes you by surprise. It is intense. It's not just uncomfortable. It's got to be that real, like, I did not see that coming. It really, and we'll have, if you freeze, there's either just like a literally freeze like a person, or you another freeze coping strategy is actually going to sleep.
Oh, right.
So you will find people who, when their system is overwhelmed, they check out by actually just going to sleep. Then you've got your flight, which is to run away, to get away as fast as you can. In children, that's actually using distractive strategies, changing the subject. So you learn how to see those things in kiddies. And then the fight is really easy to pick. You're likely to punch in the face. I say all that to say the job of approaching kids' behaviour in the right way is so that when this area is triggered for them, the downstairs, the fight, flight, freeze is triggered for them, the way that we come at that is going to determine how much of the upstairs brain we're going to bring online. And the more practice we give them at accessing that, the stronger this pathway goes. Why is that important? It's important because a huge disproportion of our kiddies end up behind bars. Why do they end up behind bars? Because you did this. I felt like punching you in the face because I'm a fight. I did it. Because I didn't have enough pathways to go, okay, you've done this thing, or I feel triggered. I'm going to punch you in the face. And there's not enough processing to go, probably not a good idea. This might happen, that might happen. And with us, those of us that have really high executive functioning, we'll go all the way to, and then when we apply for the job that we won't be able to get that, and we see that the thinking takes us right down the road of... Because
you can go long term, but when you don't have that connection between the downstairs and upstairs brain, you don't have the ability as much to think long term, or to think through the natural consequences, and to be guided by that sort of thing.
To essentially override it. So its job is to react, and then the upstairs brain's job is to override it and give it some logic and think it through and all those kind of things. So that's kind of the scenario that I will always teach is, why is this important? Because we want young people and adults who can access that and reason through their response. Their response is not wrong because it's kept them alive. It's done its job, but it's no longer helpful when they grow up.
So when did you sort of start? I mean, obviously you wrote the book, and then you had these sorts of questions of how do we do this better? And you were looking for, what were you looking for, and kind of where did that journey take you?
Yes, I was probably about almost 10 years ago. Dr. Bruce Perry, who is the founder of Child Trauma Academy in I think it's Canada, and he's a neuroscientist, he's a psychologist, he's a psychiatrist, he's incredibly intelligent man, done plenty of research on traumatized kids. He came down to New Zealand and was offering a full day workshop, and my agency that I was fostering with at the time put it out to everybody, and I snapped it up because I was like, he must have something I want to know. And I would say for me, it was sitting that whole day with Dr. Bruce Perry, who's hilariously funny, 5 children, as well as all the things he does, and just done some incredible work, in his work, and he's developed another model, which, is a trauma-based model too, which is fantastic. It was partway through that day, PD day with him, where he talked about research with monkeys around addiction and relationship. And the short story is basically this research showed that monkeys who had been clinically driven to be cocaine addicts but starved of relationship would actually choose the lever that would give them access to other monkeys over the drug, even after they were addicts, because what he interpreted that to, relationship is more powerful than a drug. We are primates similar in that the change agent for everything is relationship. And I remember sitting there thinking, I knew that, but to have neuroscience come to the table and say, this is what we know now. And he wrote the book Love Wins. He wrote the book The Boy Raised as a Dog. Anyone interested in understanding trauma, those are great books to read. The Whole Brain Child is Daniel Siegel, so he talks about the downstairs, upstairs brain. That's another great book. So these were all just coming onto the market, and the world of caregiving was only just starting to turn to a trauma model, thanks to these guys that are doing this incredible work and research. So that was the light bulb moment for me. And there was another couple of things in that seminar. He was talking about neuroplasticity. Well, that's something we all kind of bandy around now. We know our brain's neuroplastic. It changes throughout our entire life now, we know, whereas we thought it was developed and set pretty much by 7. And we know that's not true. And so we know it's an incredible machine that will make workarounds. It will come up with strategies that work for it, and it will prune things that it doesn't work for it. And so I was like, I kind of feel like that's what I was trying to say as well, And so it just gave me such hope that it's never too late. It's never too late for our kids. And in the world of care before that, it was kind of like, and even the brain development common belief was that, show me a child with a 7 and I'll show you the adult, and actually I just didn't feel like that was true. So, and also out of my own life experience, I guess I had a real sense that that's not true. I had my own plenty of adverse childhood experiences myself. So the ACE study, which is the adverse childhood experience, gives you a set of questions, and I've scored pretty much 7 out of 10. So according to that, I will have a 20-year shortened lifespan if you don't do the work on the adverse experiences. So I kind of, all the stuff came and kind of it came on top of. And then when we were looking at starting an agency that might have this flavour, that's what led us on the pathway to finding an evidence-based practice. But so that's hopefully a little bit of the journey.
Yeah. And so, and so what did you end up finding? And sort of at the core of Immerse, what is different about the way that you try to do things here to, say, what you experienced when you first became a foster parent?
Yeah, day and night. First of all, there was a small group of us who were on the same page and were really keen to see something like this launch.
Is this a group of foster parents?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a social worker as well, who had worked a long time in foster care too. So there was a small group of us and other people based here in New Zealand too, who were really keen to see something like this get off the ground. And at the time, I would say we were coming to the table with something very unique, because, like I said, it takes a while for the science and the trauma, what we call trauma-informed practice now, to catch up with mainstream. So we were bringing that very early to the table and saying, this is what we want, and there's Daniel Siegel and there's Dr. Bruce Perry and etc. But what we learned very quickly was what government at that time were looking for was evidence-based practice. Right. So that sent us on this worldwide search for, well, what is out there that's evidence-based for our kiddies? And we were very fortunate to find Trust Based Relational Intervention. It comes out of Texas Christian University. And the whole research for that for this model, which we call TBRI, was founded in intercountry adopted and foster care. So the research was all based on that cohort, which is perfect for the work that we do, based in attachment, based in neuroscience. And so they were very generous with us, gave myself and one of the other original co-founders scholarships to become the first practitioners here in New Zealand. And so we did our study here and then flew up to the States and graduated, which was awesome. And so that's how we got the evidence-based practice. How we got the service, that's a really long process. It's a highly guarded space. We're talking about level 1 service delivery under a Section 396, which is the overnight unsupervised access to very vulnerable young people. And so the process of policies and procedures and how would we practice and right, to the nuts and bolts of anything, this was a massive piece of work. Having a therapeutic evidence-based framework definitely helped build the bones and the structure of what we do. But there's still, no matter whether you had that or not, there's still a massive piece of work to get the bones and structure in place.
And so what do you do? For people who don't know anything about Immerse, what does Immerse do?
So we recruit publicly foster parents, and that can be single people or couples or people just living in relationships who want to offer their home as a safe place for kiddies to come to. We then have to put them through obviously very extensive screening and vetting processes. We additionally train them in the therapeutic model, which is one of the things that set us apart. So they are TBRI trained caregivers. We then park them on our dashboard of available homes, and then daily, when we first started out, I would get maybe 2 or 3 emails a day from the placements team with kiddies that need to be taken into care or need to be moved in care, and we look at our dashboard to say, do we have a suitable match for this child? And then if we do, we will start those conversations between Oranga Tamariki and our caregivers, and then we support the transition into their home, and then the whole time that the children are with them, we wrap a wraparound service that we call Embrace around the child and the family, and it's a needs assessment process that's based in the 12 life domains, which also fall into the Māori wellbeing framework of Te Whare Tapawha, so looking at physical, spiritual, relational and mental health. So we do a wraparound process with our kids, and we meet needs, and of course that never stops, because as one need's met, there's another need. They grow, they change, they have all these things. We also run a Saturday program for all of our kids in care aged over 4. So at the moment we've got a service that we run every second Saturday between 4 and 14 is our age group, and we recruit volunteers to be buddies for kids in that program. So those people, it's a great option for people who have a real heart for this this work but can't offer full-time foster care. A few of our foster parents have come through that pathway if they're a little bit nervous about, I'm not sure if I could do this, so they start in the Saturday program. That gives our foster parents respite, brings our siblings back together if they've been separated. And more recently, we have opened our mum and baby homes. So we have now foster parents who take in mum and baby, newborn, and we work with them in TBRI as well, in trauma-based response, and we are seeing incredible results from the homes that we've got now where mum and baby are. Our job is to facilitate attachment.
So is that, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah,
is that
new.
Where does that, because that sounds amazing, because the whole understanding of attachment is that obviously any time that you take a child away from its mother, even if it's straight away, there's still, this growing period in the womb of 9 months of attachment that's happened just, by virtue of being part of the same body. And so anytime that any disattachment happens, there is a form of trauma.
Absolutely.
And so where did that idea for mum and baby placements come from? And is it essentially to help almost be like a kind of a grandparent figure, or
it's always, George and I actually did this just, what's the right word, fell into it, I suppose, when we were young. After our first child was born, in the church that we were attending at the time, an extended family member was living in a extended family member of a church member was living in a domestic violence relationship, very reasonably bad one, and she was not from Auckland, and the child that she had was only hers, and so I think situation got quite serious at one point, and I wrote about this in my book as well, and she fled, and she said she was just driving around, she didn't know where to go, and she just thought, I'll just go to Ursula and George's house, because she even admits to this day, she goes, I didn't actually even like you, but but she said, I knew I'd be safe.
Oh, wow.
And so they just turned up on our doorstep, and we were like, yeah, of course, come in. And, George, just by stereotyping, I guess would be one of the better word, he does look like a safe person to stand behind. And although you should really be more scared of me, that started a process, and we just let her sort of come and go, because anyone that works in this, because this is addiction. You can be addicted to wrong relationships, you can be addicted to substances, you can be addicted, it's addicted to all sorts of things. And when violence or wrong relationships is another type of addiction. So we let her sort of come and go over the period in our home of about 18 months. And then eventually she just left, and she ended up marrying a cop.
Another good person to stand behind.
Yeah. And has had 2 or 3 kiddies, got a career, lives overseas now, and even still on our anniversary or different things, she will send us a message saying that it wasn't until she lived, so immerse, which is where it comes from, was immersed in the environment where this is how you do a relationship. This is this is not just on TV. Yeah. Until the biology of your body feels what that's like, it doesn't have an internal framework. And she will say the same, that she's so say that to say it was always where we wanted to go. How we were going to get there, I had no idea. But now with all of the media around uplifting newborns, and we know it's damaging, to young people, and we know that in some instances with the right supports, it could have a very different outcome. So we just took the plunge, just designed something that's, again, inside of the evidence base. You have to work with older people that are still traumatized young people.
Yeah.
But they now got a responsibility, and so it's really a double piece of work. But the outcomes are far better if we can get this to really work. And we, like I said, we're seeing incredible results with that. So we really want to, if you ask me what my favourite part will be to grow, it will be this service. Yeah.
So just brass tacks, practically, a kid comes into your home. What's going to be the difference based on whether or not you've had the training in TBRI versus not? Like, I mean, what's the thing that you hope comes from a foster parent, their intuition, their knowledge, their relating to the child, the kind of environment that they create? What's different about that?
I guess it makes me want to circle back to one of the first things you said, which was, quoting me actually, that love and a roof over their head's not enough. The first ingredient has to be love. I mean, you have to want to see this young person succeed. You have to feel something for them, because we are not thinking beings, like I said, that feel. We are downstairs feeling beings that learn to think. And so we will pick up from each other whether we like each other or not, and particularly kiddies will pick up super sensitively if they're from a hard place, whether they are wanted or liked, or, and best of all, loved. So that does have to be the baseline. But a lot of parenting strategies that work fine for children who don't have complex developmental trauma, it fixes most problems. Removing the iPhone for 2 days might remind the young person that they needed to make sure that their chores of the dishwasher and the something, whatever that is, has been achieved, right? It's a reminder that hurts a little bit, but they will bounce back from it, and everyone will carry on and life will be okay.
Because that's a cognitive process.
A child from a hard place does not have that same ability to process. So therefore, that removal is about power and control. It's about, if I'm not in control, then I'm not going to survive. And if I'm not going to survive, then I'm going to have to kick into what I know or I've trained myself to do to make sure that I will. And so it is really it's a hugely separate set of skills. You have to not be able to take things personally. And if you've got high intersensitivity, issues with people, that's hard. If a kid tells you, I hate you, F off, this, it calls you names, if you're kind of not used to, if you're going to take that personally, you've already lost before you began. So it's kind of going, I get this. This is about you. This is about where you come from. This is about what works for you. So, however, we do need to address that. But we definitely don't address it when you're downstairs. Why? Because we're not listening. You can't actually process words. I mean, if you think about the most traumatic thing you ever saw or was experienced, you're not processing language. We say, when something really stressful happens, we go into a time warp. Time, seems to warp. Everything warps, and it's because that's the space that you're in. So I often say to foster parents, correcting behaviour when a child is dysregulated, what we call dysregulated, or in the downstairs brain, or even an adult, correcting behaviour when they're like that is like learning an algebra equation jumping out of an aeroplane.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not going to go in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, we all know that. It's like, when you're in an argument with your spouse, like trying to have a logical discussion about how you're going to move forward, like you kind of need to deal with the feelings first and maybe just have the conversation later, or
Absolutely.
It's not just, it's instinctive, but when it comes to adults and children, we can often think, well, I'm the adult here, I can fix this.
Yes, and we forget that exact dynamic. It's a very good example of what it's like. And so it's realizing, because you may not be dragged into that argument, but you're just seeing the behavior, but recognizing it's not the time to fix it. And with TBRI particularly, like I said, there's a number of evidence-based now trauma kind of based models to choose from, but the thing that I love about TBRI is it's a practical toolbox, and it gives you like, okay, all right, this child is wobbling. I reckon I could try playfully interjecting here, like, come on then, let's just go for a quick jump on the tramp, and we can probably stop what could become a landslide into something massive by just a quick, playful interaction. You might try that and you might get what we call a level 2, which is like, no, I don't want to jump on the tramp with you. I don't like you. And you're like, okay, this child is now moving to level 2. What do we do at level 2? We calm our voices. We get down and we say, okay, you've got 2 choices. You can choose this or you can choose this. Both of them have to be positive. Can't be a win-lose. Children can't kids from hard places can't deal with a win-lose, so it's a win-win. And then give them the time to process it. And 90% of the time, I choose this. I've shared the power with the child. I've given them time to process it. It's a win-win. I'm happy with either one. And so we then also circumvent a train wreck. If you think about that, a level 3 is full dysregulation. At that point, you abandon the request because you're not going to get it. It's an absolute waste of time. Your goal at a level 3 is to get the child back online.
Right.
And that could be offering them food, asking them if they need a hug, taking them for a walk. Like it could just be anything that starts to calm the system back down. And then when it's all right, like you said before, then when it's the right time, you circle back to the request. And then you might offer 2 choices, or you might, the framework is easy for foster parents to work with, and it gives them a whole little tools. They're not thinking, oh, what do I do here? What do I do here? When we offer choices, we say, choices work, like I said, miraculously with kids from hard places. We think as adults we give kids lots of choices, but actually we don't. We're like, okay, it's time to go, grab your shoes, get your bag, da-da-da. And to a child from a hard place, that's just the instruction after instruction, and it's ramping up my downstairs. So with our kiddies, it could be, okay, we need to give them a lead in. There's, okay, we're going in 5 minutes. Do you want to grab your lunchbox first, or do you want to grab your jacket?
Well, it's interesting because that's practicing exercising certain amounts of power and control, which are those executive functions, right? That's those sort of upstairs things that you're talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, I mean, when someone comes to you and says, hey, look, I'd love to be a foster parent, what are the things that you sort of, how do you check whether they're really ready?
It's quite a delicate process that the initial home visit is about. It's kind of, what do you know about it first and foremost? Like you might have a very person might have a very different interpretation of what it is, so it's a bit of a reality check. What's your motivation? That's an important one. What's your capacity? What are some of the things that you've experienced and gone through and overcome, etc. Because it's not for the faint-hearted. But in saying that, we do get, we do have newborn babies that still come into service, and they do require very little apart from lots and lots and lots of normal things that we do to facilitate attachment. So, but we don't, less and less now that the ministry and organisations like us move in the direction of mum and baby homes and that kind of thinking, less and less little ones are in referrals. So you really are looking for that resilience factor for adults, because like you were saying before, you have to be able to distance yourself from behaviours, and you'll get, although some people say to me, oh, I'd like an under 5 because they'll have less trauma. I'm like, oh boy, I could give you a 2-year-old that would give you a run for your money 24/7, and I can give you a 10-year-old who's a dream. So age is not actually the issue.
Yeah.
It's the issues are the issue.
Yeah.
And so that matching process is really important. And it's like, what is their family? What's your family structure like? Where does this fit in? It is a set of unique, I guess, qualities that make really good foster parents.
And how does it affect your children?
It affects them. Yeah. My daughter wrote about that in her chapter of the book. My kids have grown up with, like I said, we would have had over probably close to 60 children, in through our home in the 18 years that we've caregived. They'll say some of them they loved and some of them they were like, bye. So it's hard, sharing your parents. We already had the issues with one of our kiddies of navigating his, brittle bone condition, which was his disability. He's great now, drives his car and gives me a run for my money as he's 17 and up to all sorts. So, he's great. He's fabulous. But, it was a journey to get there. And it affects them. But I would say that when I hear my kids talking to other people, or they find themselves in situations that most kids would actually be quite overwhelmed by, they navigate it really well. So I think it's growing. I hope one day they say that it's growing them into some pretty incredible human beings, because life has not revolved around them. Yeah.
And how do you narrate that for them when they're comparing their lives to kids from families that don't have other kids coming through?
It has come up once or twice, mostly in difficult times. Not a lot though. Not as much as people would think. Definitely not a lot. But it has come up a couple of times, and I kind of, this is my kind of comical take on it. Everyone has issues, whether we like it or not. We're all going to experience things that will give us issues that we possibly should see some kind of counselling in our lifetime to process. And I think if for me, not in a hugely detrimental way, because none of my kids have been harmed or abused or, suffered their needs, they haven't had to go without anything or anything like that. They've just had to share their home and their parents. And that's not always been easy. I figure if that's what they have to go to counselling for because other people's lives are better because they did that, I'm actually okay with that. Yeah. So that's my, I guess, comical take on it, Yeah. I've had to go to plenty of counselling for things that were far worse from my own, life. So I guess I think, well, but I offer to pay for it. I do say that. I actually offer to pay for it.
You're like, if this is your thing, I'm okay with that being your thing.
I'm paying, yeah.
What gives you hope in this space?
I mean, there's plenty of great success stories of kids coming through the care system and doing amazing things. And the skills that our young people who go through this kind of a journey, if they can land and kind of have that final processing of seeing the diamonds and all of the junk that they've had to deal with, they are phenomenal human beings. They've had to grow, and their people intuition, their survival skills, all those things are way advanced over our children that have not had to navigate this stuff. So when they harness that and they put that into the direction of doing good or being great, they excel. And in New Zealand we do have plenty of examples. Even Oranga Tamariki's Facebook page and sites have lots of good news stories that come out a lot, and these are real kids that have gone through this stuff and are doing incredible work. And so I think that gives me a lot of hope, because I mean, we are old enough now and have been doing it long enough to see good outcomes from that. And I just look forward, I suppose, to 20 years from now, hopefully some of the kiddies that have come through our service are coming back to us and saying, it made a difference. It's not everything, but we can make a positive difference. And we know even in our own relationships, there's key people at key moments in our life that wasn't necessarily the volume of time that they spent with us. It was the quality of the time or the fact that they saw us that made a difference, helped us choose a career path, or helped us become who we were. And so that's, I guess I don't feel like we have to do the whole thing. We just have to do what part we're given to do really well. I often quote the line in the movie Honey, We Bought a Zoo, the one about courage.
Sometimes all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. Just literally 20 seconds of just embarrassing bravery. And I promise you, something great will come of it.
It's kind of that, you just got to do those bits and do them really well and really courageously, and hopefully something good comes of it.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today.
Yeah, pleasure.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
If anyone has heard this conversation and is interested, how can they get in touch with Immerse? How can they? Where can they find you? Yeah,
perfect. Our website is the best place to come through. So it's Immerse, immerse.org.nz, and you can put in a request there, or you can. It's very easy to navigate. Marketing's done a wonderful job of making it easy to navigate. So yeah, that's great. The best way to come.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
If you'd like to read Shelly's article Home Again and a whole bunch of other great New Zealand content, just go to flintandsteelmag.com, where you can purchase this year's magazine and read the entire back catalogue of Flint and Steel articles from the last 6 years. You can also head along to maxim.org.nz to find out more about Maxim Institute, read our research and analysis, and sign up for our monthly forum email. Thanks for joining us for this month's podcast. From me and the rest of the team, mā te wā, goodbye for now.